Today we're here to talk about a very important piece of legislation that Senator Adley is going to file and that we are announcing our support of. We're here today to talk about improving our legal system for legacy lawsuits to make this process more fair and responsive for all parties. A sensible, fair, and predictable legal system is critical to protecting the rights of our citizens who have legitimate claims, but it's also important to protect the rights of those who have been accused of wrongdoing. Exploiting the legal system destroys its legitimacy. It discourages investment in our state. As a result, we could lose jobs that continue to grow our state's economy. For the last decade, there have been disputes between landowners and oil and gas companies about the impacts to property and resources as a result of exploration and production activities. There have been efforts over the years to address this issue, both through the legislature and the courts, but unfortunately, a fair solution has been elusive to date. This self-inflicted wound has gone on long enough. It is past time we all work together to develop a consensus approach. I'm proud to announce that today we have actually gotten that approach. This is a difficult issue. It involves operations conducted decades ago, standards that have evolved over time as technology has improved, and the changing ownership of properties and lease rights. It's also difficult because it involves, on one hand, an industry that has been the cornerstone of our economy for literally the last century. On the other hand, land rights and environmental concerns that are important to our way of life. The legislature has made several attempts to find a balance to these interests, and they have made progress. Unfortunately, however, progress has been hampered by exploitative lawsuits, so-called legacy lawsuits, that do more to enrich lawyers than to resolve disputes or protect the rights of the parties. We can no longer let these lawsuits needlessly delay cleanup, investment, and timely resolution to disputes. To be clear, lawsuits should be used as a means of last resort, not as a club by trial lawyers to extract exploitive settlements. Today, we're here to announce our support for proposed legislation that will promote the fair resolution of legacy claims and the remediation of property while discouraging the exploitation of lawsuits for money. This legislation will do four key things. First, this legislation provides that if a responsible party admits liability for a regulatory cleanup, there will be a rebuttable presumption that the cleanup plan approved or structured by DNR is the most feasible plan to evaluate or remediate environmental damage under the applicable regulatory standards. This presumption will be charged to the jury. This provision strengthens the limited admission process created back in 2012. It will encourage even more operators to make admissions, which will result in more regulatory cleanups prior to protracted and very expensive litigation. And that really is the point of all this anyway, is to clean up Louisiana's land. Secondly, the legislation clarifies the types of damages that may be recovered in a legacy lawsuit and the standards for recovering those damages. This will eliminate gamesmanship, provides predictability to the oil and gas companies, while also protecting landowners so they're able to collect actual damages to which they're entitled. Third, the legislation will allow for attorney fees in favor of a party who is dismissed on a motion for preliminary dismissal. The right to file a motion for preliminary dismissal was created in 2012 to give defendants an early path out of the case when there's no evidence that a defendant has any responsibility. This process was created to remedy scattershot lawsuits where the plaintiff names every person and company in the claim of title, in the chain of title. This new provision will discourage these types of claims in the first place, discouraging frivolous claims, frivolous lawsuits, by making the plaintiff responsible for paying the cost of attorney fees incurred by the defendant to obtain a preliminary dismissal. Fourth and finally, the legislation will define contamination to mean the introduction or presence of substances or contaminants into a usable groundwater aquifer or soil in such quantities as to render them unsuitable for their reasonably intended purposes. Currently, environmental damage is defined in the law, but the definition uses the word contamination, which is not defined in the law. Providing a common sense definition of contamination will make clear that environmental damage means something more than the mere presence of any constituent in the soil or groundwater. In other words, it must rise to some level that is unsafe or unsuitable before it can support a claim for environmental damage. Now, this is going to be a very important piece of legislation. There are other bills going through the process that will also provide additional improvements in this area. For example, there's a bill by Senator Adley to stay litigation following a limited admission, a bill by Senator Allen to require that parties attempt alternative dispute resolution before expensive years of litigation. We support those concepts. I encourage the stakeholders to continue to work together on language that all sides can support. The legislation we're announcing today represents a lot of hard work and a lot of compromise between a lot of people. And again, there's several folks I want to thank. Many of them are standing behind me today, and you're going to hear from some of them. I especially want to thank Senator Adley, who's been a tireless leader in this cause, who will be carrying this legislation. And as I close, I want to ask the senator to come up, and after he's done, any of the other legislators, I invite Senator Allen and the representatives here to come up, and then we've got James Justice and Blake and Stephen and others, and Christian and others I invite to come and speak as well. As I close, I want to say that, again, not only do I commend the folks who have worked so hard on this legislation, this is an extremely important piece of legislation. I think this consensus is noteworthy in that it does a couple of very important things. One, it allows us to clean up our lands more quickly and efficiently in Louisiana. Secondly, it creates a predictable environment for industry, not only for the energy industry and oil and gas companies, but it sends a signal to the rest of the country that we welcome responsible investment and job creation in the state of Louisiana. I think it strikes the right balance. It protects the interests of our landowners, protects our environmental interests in our state, while at the same time ensures that industry is not being exposed to frivolous and overly expensive litigation that is unrelated to the merits. And so I want to thank everybody for working so hard, everybody here and these other groups that are represented for working so hard to reach this common sense consensus. With that, I'd ask Senator Adley to come up. And again, he's been a tireless advocate. He's worked on this issue for a number of years and has been a driving force to getting to this consensus, this compromise. I'd like Senator Adley to come talk about his legislation, the other legislation, and you'll hear from other folks, and I'll come back and take questions.
Thank
Robert?
you, Governor. God bless you. Thank you.
Let's give him a round of applause.
Governor, I appreciate the comments, but I have to tell you that it's truly not me or even my colleagues that have brought this about. It's taken a great deal of work garnering up everyone as you have done. That's very difficult to do, and if you had not provided the leadership to get that done, I can assure you we would not be standing here today, and for that I want to thank you, and I know the state of Louisiana thanks you. I can tell you, I can look down this list at every person that's been involved through this process trying to get to this, and each one of them have played a very important role, and the goal has been really very simple for all of us. We had to find a way to continue to protect the lands in the state of Louisiana, to create what accountability we could create, and along with predictability for the industry. And working together, I think we've come to that point. And to sum it up for you in a nutshell, what this piece of legislation does, it basically takes two Supreme Court cases that began back in 2010 and another one in 2013 that came on the heels of other legislation that we were writing in an effort to ensure that the money we spent in particular judicial action would get this state cleaned up, and the money would go to the cleanup. This legislation now, I think, brings clarity to those two cases. That's what it does. In a nutshell, it creates that clarity, brings it to a head, and now gives us a guideline to move forward, hopefully getting more people out of the courtroom and more dollars onto our property and our land in the state of Louisiana. Senator Allen, I want to tell you, without your help and the landowners, obviously this would not have occurred. To Mr. Faircloth, I know the endless hours you went through. I've spent many meetings with you. Mr. Waggersback, I can tell you, your role just taking over lobby, if you had not intervened and taken a lead, we clearly would not have been here. And to my other colleagues, and to Hutch, to you and Nologa, to Mid-Continent, all of you, it was critical we get to this point. Louisiana has got a lot to be proud about, y'all. We are a great state. And there are times when we do things that the rest of the nation cannot do. And each state has its things it has to do. But in the process of doing that, you have to find a way to work your way through your responsibility. I think we've done that today. I see Senator Chabert join us. I want to thank you, sir. I know what you've gone through to help us with this. I want to thank you. With that, Governor, I appreciate it, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you, and appreciate being here. This is definitely a step in the right direction to give clarity to the laws and the process. Hopefully the end result will be we'll be spending more money cleaning up the lands in the state of Louisiana and getting those clean, and less money in the courtrooms. I'm happy to be a part of it. I'd like to recognize the governor for his leadership, Senator Adley, Senator Chabert, Gordon Dove, all of those who participated, and particularly proud of the the Louisiana Landowners Association stepping to the plate and participating in this. Thank you.
And I've been involved in this for a few months, mostly as a peacemaker and a money tree for these lawyers, but but anyway, I've always had a strong belief that reasonable people engaged in commerce can come together and reach reasonable decisions. And I'm really proud to say that this has been done. I think it'll benefit the landowners and the oil operators going forward. And most importantly, I think it'll benefit we the consumers, because we often lose sight of the fact that we consumers ultimately pay all the cost. So I think it's a win-win situation for the trial legacy lawyers that may be present. Get an honest job.
I'm Blake Cooper with Royo Martin here representing Royo Martin III. Just on behalf of our company, on behalf of Roy, we certainly appreciate the governor's leadership. We certainly appreciate Jimmy Faircloth coming to the table and bringing and assisting in this compromise. Senator Adley, we certainly appreciate it. Look forward to working and moving this state forward in a prudent manner. So thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
Stephen Wagasback with Lobby. What I would say is, in this state, unfortunately, far too often, we sue first and we talk second. And I think what you see here is a representation of flipping that model on its head. These are different stakeholders that got together, worked through issues, worked through complex drafting, and got to a point where they could agree. And I think that is the model we need to start taking more often if we're going to get to true comprehensive solutions to the challenges we face. And so I'm very proud to stand here with these gentlemen and work with them through the process to make sure that this good concept turns into good law. That's going to change the type of environment where we can not only see cleanup of property, but also see a robust investment opportunity we see here. The other thing I would say is, if you go talk to our neighboring states and ask them, how do you deal with legacy lawsuits? The first thing they're going to ask you is, what is a legacy lawsuit? This is something that we've created in the state. And I think what we see today is an effort to where we go and we put a rational law in place, we put a rational implementation process in place, so we can, for the first time, move forward in getting cleanup and getting a robust investment environment that everyone else can be proud of. Thank you very much.
I'm Paul Fry. I'm Executive Director of the Louisiana Landowners Association, and it's like an Academy Award presentation. I just want to thank all these folks, but Senator Holland has brought some reasoning to our group as well, and he acknowledged us, but I want to acknowledge him, because our membership actually stretches from the Texas border to the Biloxi Marsh on the east. We've got marsh owners, we've got farmers, we've got timber owners, and the bottom line is we want our property cleaned up, and we feel like we've reached that compromise now, so we look forward to making this thing work.
There are a lot of people to thank, a lot of hours, a lot of miles that were driven through the last several months. I want to take maybe just a little different track and thank the General Counsel over at Mid-Continent Oil and Gas, Mike Lyons. Mike spent a myriad of hours. He spent weekends and hours working through this, and this is truly a compromise. This is a compromise that many people said that we could not get to given after the 2012 legislative session. But I think it was important from an oil and gas perspective that we want to be responsible neighbors, and we want to be able to go out and clean up these sites, but we needed some certainty. And the certainty was not there with a lot of these court cases and these lawsuits. There was too much money being made through these frivolous lawsuits. So it was, I think, incumbent upon us as an industry, which is very important to Louisiana, to get with the landowners and forge a compromise and forge a relationship that comes to fruition today with this important compromise. You know, there was this saying that was bandied around back in the, I guess, late 80s or early 80s, late 70s, that please give us another oil boom and we'll promise we won't mess it up. I think this bill is a testament to we're serious about taking advantage of what's happening in this state. We're on the really the cusp of an energy renaissance, and as long as we continue to pass these kinds of measures, pro-business, inviting people in, and with the governor's leadership to be able to create this kind of environment, I think it's all good for Louisiana and its future. So thank you very much to all that was a part of this.
On behalf of the over 1,650 individuals and member companies that we represent in the independent sector, I would like to thank Governor Jindal and Senator Adley and Senator Alain, Representative Dove, and all the other members of the legislature, as well as every one of the individuals up here for the hard work and dedication that they've put in and the leadership to get us to this point. You know, the legacy lawsuits have been plaguing our industry for far too long. They're driving investment out of the state of Louisiana with all-time record low rig counts in South Louisiana. And this is another step in the right direction of turning that decline curve and rig activity around and getting the independent oil and gas sector in Louisiana investing in Louisiana once again and bringing our hardworking men and women back from Texas, back from West Virginia, and I'm bringing them back home to drill and explore here in Louisiana. And I just want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be a part of it.